Student suspended? Well, a woman in the middle of a campus controversy says Barry University has booted her from class. NBC6 reporter Jamie Garola live in Miami Shores with the latest on this. Jamie, what's this all about?
Well, the suspension means that student is not allowed here on campus and is not allowed to go to class. Now, according to an apparent suspension letter, the university says the student created a hostile environment here. An undercover video on this website created a firestorm of negative publicity for Barry University. Project Veritas alleges the school is sympathetic to the terror group ISIS, and they argue a secretly recorded video taken by a student proves it.
This student came to me and had the courage, and we decided to partner with her and work with her. But we aren't, it's not limited to Barry.
Senior Laura Loomer partnered with Project Veritas and its president, James O'Keefe. The organization is known for its undercover videos. Project Veritas says it produces them to fight corruption by attempting to expose nonprofits and corporations. In this case, Barry University.
The individual who signed the documentation to start the ISIS club, I believe, is also her thesis advisor.
In the video, which we're choosing not to air, Loomer pretends to want to start a club that supports and aids ISIS. The advisor vaguely said yes and said in general terms the university doesn't try and limit clubs. That was enough for Project Veritas to attack, accusing the school of being terrorist sympathizers.
It is reprehensible to think any organization would acquire video and edit it in such a way as to denigrate the reputation of Barry University or its staff.
That was campus officials last week. This week, they've apparently suspended Loomer because, quote, your alleged actions were the cause root of disruption at the university community and the creation of a hostile environment for members of the university staff. Project Veritas is crying foul and says the university is failing to own up to being pro-ISIS, something administrators say is absurd.
It says to me that he really is not interested in Veritas, which is truth.
Now, Project Veritas says that the suspension is a personal attack on an honors student because the university could not defend its staff members. By the way, Barry University cannot confirm the suspension because doing so would violate student privacy laws. We're live tonight in Miami Shores. Jamie Garola, NBC6, South Florida.
Bill Gates? Mark Zuckerberg? Really strange. This 19-year-old guy drops out from Harvard and founds Facebook, okay? And now he's a billionaire. How does that happen, guys? Well, it must be the American dream. Oh, ChatGPT, guys. Really strange. If you have a dream and you just follow it, you can become a billionaire in America. Yeah. It's all just a scam, right? Google, it's all just a scam, okay? What you need to understand about these companies is they were all founded with US military technology that is public, okay? The internet, it's a US military technology. Google, the search engine, it's all US military technology. And they were given to these guys for free. Why would they do that? Okay? Again, if you think that we're ruled by secret societies, and it's really secret societies that control the world, and they want this technology out there to better surveil people, it makes a lot more sense, right? Because if the Pentagon said, hey, we have this free computer that you can use, you'd be like, I'm not gonna use this computer because you'll spy on me, right? But if Mark Zuckerberg says, hey, free Facebook, guys, you wanna use it? You're like, yeah, sure, Facebook, yeah. He's a dork from Harvard, of course he can be trusted, right? Same strategy, okay, guys?
Guys, oh my god. easy. Don't hurt yourself.
Help? Do I need help? Oh, brother, do I need help.
It's 4 in the morning. There's one way to show the
Why long? Go. I don't know. Nice. Very nice.
How about a beer, fellas?
Great. George, what's the fuss, Gus? Beer.
All around, y'all.
Oh, change the pace, Grace.
Something special then.
Gotcha. Here comes the bull. Bull, the Schlitz malt liquor bull. When you wanna change your pace.
Ooh, get yourself a big bold taste.
Nobody makes malt liquor like Schlitz. You're so right, Dwight. Comfortable when your beer is like Schlitz malt liquor bull.
This right here behind me is the reason why I will not have to pay for a heating bill for the next 30 years. Let me show you how it works. So inside this door here is a burn chamber. What you do is you get a big hot fire going in here, and then on the outside of this burn chamber is a water jacket. So you fill up the outside here with water. Then these pipes on the outside pump water into the house. The fire heats up the water goes through a heat exchanger in your furnace, and then when your furnace fan kicks on, it blows air through the heat exchanger, heating the air, blows the air through your house. So you heat your house from a fire that's outside your house. The really cool thing about this is that underneath this cover right here is a stoke fan and an automatic damper. When the temperature of the water drops below a certain point, it kicks on the fan and it blows oxygen into the fire, stoking the fire automatically and gets the water back up to temperature. I'm working on building a frame around it to hold an insulation jacket, and this will allow me, my wife, and the little ones to stay nice and warm all winter long. If you're interested in seeing how this comes together, give me a follow. Thanks for watching.
Someone's gonna set this thing on fire if it doesn't move soon.
Think about this. You go into a grocery store, you buy a lemon pie, bag of lemon candy. You read the label, it'll say made with artificial flavoring or made with imitation lemon. Now you go to the other side of the store to get some furniture polish, they got lemon pledge. On the can, it says made with real lemon. That bothers me. We're eating the artificial junk and we're spraying the good stuff on the coffee table.
All right, so I took the other sample in, and I've been collecting more of this particles in the fog or whatever the substance is, and I put it in here. And I got a shiny light, so now you're getting kind of a look straight at the stuff. It's definitely like an oily texture, and it is on top, and I do have like a magnifying glass, but I don't think that it's going to work. But see them bubbles on top of that moisture? The moisture collects in there, and so do the particles, and you see like this stuff. It's like, I don't know, it's like oil. People have been saying like glycerin or glycerine or something. I'm not sure, but I know that this might be why everybody's getting sick. So, crazy fall of 2025.
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
Rocking around the Christmas tree at the Christmas party hop. Mistletoe hung where you can.
Hear the last one. They don't know where it's coming from.
I'm nervous that you're taking it.
Oh, hell yeah!
Welcome to the Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism.
Oh boy, that was a super song! And now, let's hear from the school teacher, Mr. Garrison.
Okay, children, let's take our seats. Today we're going to learn how different cultures around the world celebrate the holiday season. Now pay attention. I heard there is no Christmas in the silly Middle East. No trees, no snow, no Santa Claus. They have different religious beliefs. They believe in Muhammad and not in our holiday. And so every December I go to the Middle East and say, hey there, Mr. Muslim, Merry fucking Christmas. Put down that book, the Koran, and here's some holiday wishes. In case you haven't noticed, it's Jesus' birthday. So get off your heathen Muslim ass and fucking celebrate. There is no holiday season in India, I've heard. They don't hang up their stockings, and that is just absurd. They never read a Christmas story, they don't know what Rudolph is about. And that is why in December I'll go to India and shout. Hey there, Mr. Hinduist, Merry fucking Christmas. Drink eggnog and eat some beef and pass it to the missus. In case you haven't noticed, it's Jesus' birthday. So get off your heathen Hindu ass and fucking celebrate. Now I heard that in Japan, everyone just lives in sin. They pray to several gods and put needles in their skin. On December 25th, all they do is eat a cake. And that is why I go to Japan and walk around and die. Hi there, Mr. Shintoist! Merry fucking Christmas! God is gonna kick your ass, you infidelic pagan scum. In case you haven't noticed, there's festive things to do. So let's all rejoice for Jesus. Merry fucking Christmas to you. On Christmas Day, I travel around the world and say, now it's Christmas bonus and all you atheists too. Merry fucking Christmas to you. Thank you, Mr. Head.
Welcome to the Independent Review. Live on AM Wake Up, on Odyssey, Rumble, Substack, and the Indie News Network on Twitter. Our first clip is from Dave DeCamp of antiwarnews.com.
Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is Anti-War News for Wednesday, December 24th, 2025. All right, so first thing, Merry Christmas, everyone. This is the last show, taking my Christmas break after I record this. So I hope everyone has a good one. I'm going to take a nice long weekend. We will be updating, if there's major news stories, foreign policy wise, we will be posting stuff on the page at antiwar.com. I'm hoping not too much happens over this weekend, but we will see. And today, this will probably be a shorter episode than usual. The news, I kept the news kind of light today in the top section. So the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Israeli Defense Minister vows permanent Gaza occupation. So Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz vowed on Tuesday that the Israeli military will never leave all of Gaza and will eventually establish settlements in the northern part of the Strip. So Katz said he was at some event in the West Bank, quote, "We are deep inside Gaza and will never leave all of Gaza. That will not happen. We are here to defend and to prevent what happened," end quote. So he went on to talk about this type of Israeli military program. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but as I understand it, it's a way that people who join the IDF together create some kind of communities together. And basically what he's talking about is establishing residences for the military in northern Gaza to start up settlements. So he went on and said, quote, "With God's help, when the time comes, also in northern Gaza, we will establish Nahal pioneer groups in place of the settlements that were evacuated. We'll do it in the right way at the appropriate time," end quote. So Katz also vowed that Israel would not withdraw 1 millimeter from Syria, referring to the territory Israel has captured in southwest Syria since the fall of former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, saying they're not going to pull 1 millimeter. We're not going to retreat at all in Syria, pull back at all for any kind of deal with the Syrian government. And so after Katz's remarks sparked a big backlash because he's saying, permanent occupation and we're going to start building settlements. And so his office put out a statement that was kind of reported as him walking it back, saying, no, we're not building settlements. But I didn't really take it that way. I'll read what he said. His office said, quote, "The government has no intention of establishing settlements in the Gaza Strip," end quote. But it added that the comments he made were in a security context. So, of course, the Israeli government, at this point, they're not going to officially come out and say, the plan is to build Jewish settlements in Gaza. But they'll say things like, oh, we need to establish community. The language is going to be, them claiming that it's necessary for security. So anyway, there was criticism from a U.S. official, from an unnamed U.S. official, but this is what the Trump administration put out in response to reporters asking for a comment on this. And they said that the comments were provoking the Arab world. So this is what a U.S. official said, again, this is a statement given by the Trump administration to reporters, attributed to an unnamed U.S. official. None of them, even with comments like this from Katz, they can't even go on the record to criticize Israel, even when he's saying permanent occupation and settlements. So this is what the official said, quote, "The more Israel provokes, the less the Arab countries want to work with them. The United States remains fully committed to President Trump's 20-point peace plan, which was agreed to by all parties and endorsed by the international community. The plan envisions a phased approach to security, governance, and reconstruction in Gaza. We expect all parties to adhere to the commitments they made under the 20-point plan," end quote. So the thing is, the big issue with the plan is that they didn't actually sign the the deal that Israel and Hamas signed was a ceasefire, which Israel has obviously violated in many ways, but they basically agreed to enter negotiations on the 20 points, but they never signed agreeing to each point. But anyway, just Katz making it very clear that Israel does not want to go through with this plan that Trump has. And notably, he did not walk back his comments about permanent Israeli occupation of Gaza. And we've seen other Israeli officials make similar comments, including the IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir. He said earlier this month that the so-called yellow line, which is the very vague boundary separating the IDF occupied side of Gaza with the rest of the strip, he said that yellow line is a new border. And this is what the fear has been, that what has become the status quo, this Israeli military occupation of more than 50% of Gaza, is going to be long-term or permanent. And so, when they talk about settlements, they're set up, with having half of Gaza basically cleansed of the Palestinian population, besides a small number, very small number, maybe a few hundred or a few thousand, civilians living under the Israeli-backed gangs and militias. But again, that compared to the nearly 2 million who are on the other side of Gaza, it's really nothing. But so they're set up, occupying all this territory. It's where things have just been completely destroyed to, start building if they want, and start, settlements could start popping up. If this is the status quo, if this is the long-term situation. And as we covered earlier this week, there was settlers who recently went into Gaza and raised a flag. And they have a lot of support among members of the Israeli government and members of the Israeli Knesset. You have Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, explicitly saying that there will be Jewish settlements in Gaza. He's even said that after the ceasefire. So we know what they want. What the Israeli government really wants is full ethnic cleansing and takeover of Gaza. And Trump's trying to force this plan that has a lot of problems, the things that we've talked about. You have Jared Kushner and Witkoff drawing up all sorts of strange reconstruction plans. But even that, Israel doesn't want that. They are basically waiting for the word from Trump to restart, full scale bombing campaign and everything. All right, so the next one here, the IDF pushes deeper into Gaza's yellow line, displacing civilians. So this article is from the Palestine Chronicle. So this is on Tuesday, there were more Israeli attacks, shelling, airstrikes. No word on casualties from the reports that I've seen, but the military activity continues in violation of the ceasefire. And I think what is the most significant part of this is that there was reports that there had been the expansion of the so-called yellow line in the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, where Israeli military vehicles advanced and reinforced elevated military positions. The move has forced residents living in tents or amid the rubble of destroyed homes to flee toward western areas. And of course, the people living near the yellow line, we've seen all these reports about people being shot, bombed beyond, west of where they thought the yellow line was, at least. So the more Israel pushes in, it's going to push people, displace people yet again. So according to the report, the occupation aims to transform these areas into forward military positions for launching attacks and targeting Palestinians using both drones and elevated armored vehicles that now overlook and control large parts of Gaza. On the humanitarian front, international organizations have warned that famine is once again looming over Gaza due to ongoing Israeli restrictions. Also, restrictions on medical supplies entering Gaza is causing a lot of problems. And so again, when we talk about, we're seeing them on the ground pushing this yellow line further, a little bit at a time, a little bit up in north, a little bit in the south. And so, we know, as I just said, we know what Israel really wants here. And that's why there's not going to be any kind of real peace until there's a fundamental change to the U.S.-Israel relationship and a decision to completely cut them off, because they are so reliant on U.S. military aid that is one of the things that could stop them. But obviously, I don't think we're going to see Trump do that, unfortunately. Anyway, so the next one here, the U.S. sends additional forces to the Caribbean. So the U.S. has moved a number of special operations aircraft and multiple cargo planes carrying troops to the Caribbean this week, and this was reported by the Wall Street Journal as the Trump administration continues to escalate against Venezuela. The report, citing U.S. officials and flight tracking data, said at least 10 CV-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft assigned to Special Operations Forces flew into the region Monday night from Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. C-17 cargo planes from Fort Stewart in Georgia and Fort Campbell, which is located on the Tennessee-Kentucky border, also arrived in Puerto Rico. And the latest deployments come as the U.S. has begun enforcing a blockade on Venezuela, which so far has involved seizing the 2 tankers carrying Venezuelan oil. As far as I'm aware, that one that they were chasing in the Atlantic Ocean, they still haven't captured. And so this is something that Trump said on Monday, referring to Maduro, quote, "He can do whatever he wants. It's all right, whatever he wants to do. If he wants to do something, if he plays tough, it'll be the last time he's ever able to play tough," end quote. So it seems to be a threat that if he responds to any sort of, in any way to this military action, aggression, constant military flights near his coast, then, the U.S. is going to use that to escalate. I think that's part of the strategy here, is they're hoping to provoke some sort of incident and then use that and say, oh, we don't need Congress, it's self-defense. And they're going to, use that to justify actually bombing Venezuela or trying to take Maduro out. Even though, obviously, anyone who has followed this for the last few months, it'll be very clear that there's no way the U.S. would be able to claim self-defense after everything that they've been doing right off the coast of Venezuela. But this is, I think, probably what they're hoping for here, so they don't have to worry about congressional authorizations and things like that. So also on Monday, U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said that Maduro needs to be gone, one of the most explicit statements from a Trump administration official about the desire for regime change. She said, quote, "We're not just interdicting these ships, but we're also sending a message around the world that the illegal activity that Maduro's participating in cannot stand. He needs to be gone," end quote. Noem announced the second tanker seizure over the weekend involving the capture of a ship carrying Venezuelan oil by a Chinese company. As we've covered, China is unhappy with that. So this goes on, and the U.S. has no legal right to take these tankers. This is theft and piracy. I mean, they're trying to dress it up as some sort of law enforcement operation when really this is, any way you look at it, this is an act of war against another country. That's certainly how the U.S. would take it if another country was doing this off of our coast. All right, so the next one here, U.S. military blows up another alleged drug boat in Latin America. So the bombing campaign against the boats continues. The U.S. military has blown up another alleged drug boat in the waters of Latin America, according to a statement released by U.S. Southern Command. So, this just goes on. We'll just go over the numbers briefly here. I mean, nothing really new. They just keep blowing up these boats. So they're claiming that, again, this was a boat carrying drugs in the Eastern Pacific. No evidence, of course, being provided to back up these claims. They said that one person was killed in the strike. So that brings the total number of people killed in these extrajudicial executions at sea to 105. A total of 29 strikes have been launched and 30 boats have been blown up, including 11 in the Caribbean and 20 in the Eastern Pacific. All right, so the next one here, Israeli settlers hurt children and beat sheep to death. So Jewish settlers in the Israeli-occupied West Bank sprayed children with tear gas and beat several sheep to death as part of an overnight attack on a Palestinian home near the village of Samu in the Hebron Hills of the southern part of the territory. So according to the AP, a Palestinian official said that the settlers smashed a window and door of the home and sprayed gas inside, sending 3 children under the age of 4 to the hospital. The settlers also entered a building housing sheep, and footage shows them beating the animals, and the attack killed 3 sheep and wounded 4 others. And Haaretz reported that Israeli police arrested 5 settlers and that they had ample evidence they were responsible for the attack, though settlers are rarely held for long or prosecuted for attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank. They're usually let go, even if they kill people. And this same home, if this story sounds familiar, this is the same home that was targeted last month. And there was videos of settlers beating, smashing little lambs with concrete blocks. They killed a total of 6 lambs. I mean, just totally vicious. And there was reports that I saw pictures that they gouged their eyes out. I mean, this is really sick stuff. And they're terrorizing these people because they want their land. In this video, again, they beat, they're beating these sheep to death. I mean, it's just a really sick thing to do. I'm a big fan of sheep. I have 2 sheep that are basically pets. Sometimes I just hang out outside with them, walk around with them. We got them as lambs. I love sheep and lambs. I also eat lamb, but, I understand killing them for meat, but you do it obviously in a humane way. Beating a lamb to death, gouging a lamb's eyes out is just, man, it's just barbaric. And I feel like there's just so much symbolism here, this being in the land where Jesus was born and lived, and he's the Lamb of God. And then you have these settlers killing lambs like this. But anyway, just barbarism. And this is, part of the growing trend. Apparently this area, there was a settler outpost was put up about 2 years ago. And since then, there's been increasing violence, which is the trend across the West Bank. We've seen record numbers of settler attacks. And this is also, this is something, that U.S. military aid to Israel supports, even though they don't openly say it. I mean, you have guys like Mike Huckabee who do openly say that they support the settlements and the expansion. But this is something that U.S. military aid to Israel has always supported, even though many administrations try to distance themselves from the settlements.
Next, we take a look at this clip from the Ripple Effect podcast with host Ricky Varandas.
The state of the economy now, and I'm not really the best on all these statistics, but I've seen them about how, there's these direct correlations between the unaffordability, as they put it now, of homes for young people, and then their reluctance then to get married and have kids and continue to propagate our society. It's like, as I was telling Bob, there's a book called Secrets of the Temple by William Greider, which is sort of the Washington Post version of The Creature from Jekyll Island, right? It's sort of like inside the Federal Reserve in the Paul Volcker term in the 80s. And they're talking about how after the decade of inflation, after the end of the gold standard and all the stagflation through the 70s, people remember it as Reagan, but it was really started during Carter, was they brought in Paul Volcker and he ratcheted up interest rates really high in order to deliberately force a great recession, put the economy in a total headlock, liquidate all the bad debts, force this massive crash in order to finally beat inflation and then get a fresh start again. And this is a huge part of why Carter lost. It wasn't just the hostage crisis. It was just, imagine interest rates at, in the high teens and into the 20% for buying a house, whatever. I remember when I was a kid watching Hee Haw, and it was sponsored by the mobile homes and the trucks. And I remember them saying, come on down to Leaf Johnson Ford. You can get a Ford truck with just 21% financing, 22%, this kind of thing. And that was when I was really young. Really high interest rates at that time. That was like my introduction to even what was the subject. You know what I mean? Like we're talking when I was like 5 and 81, something like that. Right around then, and they finally let up in 83, I guess, 84. Anyway, my point is this, man. In that book, they talk about how at the Federal Reserve, they keep all the charts and graphs and all the social science up to date on the bankruptcies. And then, of course, also the divorces, the foster care, the suicides, all of the negative reverberating consequences of their monetary policies. And then, as you and I understand from our exposure to Austrian economics, I don't know how expert you are in it or not, but I know enough to know that the way our system works with our inflationary money is the people, the regular people, get screwed coming and going. And that is during the good times, so-called, when people who own assets are doing better through inflation, regular working people are paying higher and higher prices, and their wages are the last thing to keep up with the cost of living. Then when the wages finally do go up, they blame the wage earners and go, yeah, all this upward pressure on wages is causing inflation. Oh, man, that's in the good times when you can't afford prices because they keep going up and up and up. That's the good times. That's the artificial bubble. The only correction when that inflation gets out of control is what we were just talking about, like with the example of Paul Volcker. They raised the interest rates and caused the crash. This is what Bernanke ultimately did. He raised the interest rates, said we're getting too much inflation too fast. We have to stop it. This is the guy that came after Greenspan, who had initiated it all. And he came in and finally said, Ron Paul's right. This is getting out of hand. Well, what's his tool in the kit? Higher interest rates. That's what then caused the crash. Big fake bubble, very real crash of 2008, right? And then they do it. And then, by the way, that very real crash then means people who own property get, take as they call it, a haircut, right? Or get completely screwed on the value of what they had invested in, especially people buy in at the way too high prices at the peak of the bubble, then they're what's called underwater, bankrupt and screwed, owning assets that they owe more than it's worth and all of that kind of thing. Total dislocations there. And then on top of that, just the mass layoffs and just the total slowdown and even shutdown of the economy in major ways. So you're standing in line at the unemployment office, staring at your shoes, and that's your economic price to pay for whatever supposed benefits you got during the supposed good times of the artificial bubble. Now, that's not just capitalism, as your government school professor or teacher would explain it. That is our inflationary monetary system. Whereas Ron Paul would say, 1/2 of every transaction is the dollar. This government, essentially like communist run, commissar run, police power controlled instrument, this currency that they manipulate at the expense of everybody else to such a horrible degree. And so, yes, there are horrible consequences for everybody. And two, they know it. You could just argue this whole thing is a welfare program for the baby boomers because they're the most votingest constituency. First of all, they're the boom. So they're the biggest generation and they don't have jobs anymore. So they just sit around voting for a living. And what series of what politician, certainly not Donald Trump, is willing to say, sorry, real estate holders, your artificially high prices have got to come down and we're not going to subsidize them anymore. We're due for another 08 and we better get it over now, better now than later. Nuh-uh. Every politician's job, every Fed chairman's job is kicking that can down the road. And, it's amazing that you had, first of all, we were due for a crash when the lockdowns of 2020 came. And anyway, and then the lockdowns themselves were the Paul Volcker. They were the high interest rates and the forced recession of that time. And that crash. But then what they do, of course, created trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, more than ever before, in order to make up for that crash. So it's just like 08 again, only even more so. Just like with all the quantitative easing of the Obama era and the aftermath of the Bush crash, It's the same thing again with Trump and into Biden of creating all of this new money in order to make up for the recession that they had forced. In other words, right back to the same old problem of all this inflation again. But then the Fed raised interest rates quite a bit during Biden. But it was enough to make it more expensive to get into a house, even than it already was at inflated prices. But it wasn't enough to really cause a recession and bring those prices down. So it only made housing even more unaffordable during this time. Although prices have come down in some places, but not nearly as high as they've gone since the forced lockdown crash of 2020. Certainly not around here where I live in Central Texas. And so now Trump is, of course, putting all this pressure on the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates lower. And they just lowered the federal funds rate another 1/4 point. So they're getting back now to inflation. In other words, Trump, and I'm sure you and your audience are very familiar with his threats against the Fed. Enough of this. You are not going to cause a recession on my watch. I will regime change you at that Federal Reserve Board. You're going to serve me, which, by the way, this is supposedly the reason for the so-called independence of the Fed in the first place, is because Congress and the president will always want to inflate. They'll never want to say too much. We have to slow it down. And so this is what they would say. This is not really true, but they would say that the job of the Fed chairman is to take the punch bowl away at the party when it's getting too out of hand and people are getting too drunk on their irrational exuberance. Then they're supposed to raise the interest rates and make it more difficult for speculators to speculate with funny new money. But they don't do that, right? They give in, especially when the president's threatening them this way. They give in, they cut rates and continue. So this is, to me, I'm no Ron Paul by a long shot. I'm only talking about what it reminds me of is the heroic Ron Paul from the time he came back to Congress in 97 through 99 saying there's a crash coming. This .com bubble is a big bubble because you've created too much money and it's obviously created this giant bubble and it's going to crash. And then it did in 99, 2000, the NASDAQ and the stock market crashed. And then he said, but then look at you. All you do is create even more money. You lower interest rates even more. Instead of letting the bad debts liquidate, you continued to inflate. And then, of course, September 11th happened. So we were due for a recession. We already had a recession. You might remember when W. Bush came in. He goes, hey, it's the Clinton recession. I just got here. It's already a recession. That was true. It was already a recession was coming in from, again, the crash was in 99, 2000. And then we had the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001, right in the financial center of the most important city in New York City, right in downtown Manhattan. And using airliners and hitting banks and insurance companies and all these, massive firms that were taken down in the attacks themselves, literally, and then the shutdown of the stock market for a week or two or whatever it was in the aftermath. So we were due. We had to suffer a double dip recession, but they said nuh-uh, and they just cranked the interest rates down to zero and inflated that bubble then. So anyway, I'm sorry. I got lost telling the story out of order, but the point being that there are these horrible social consequences and political consequences. I'm sure you're familiar with Trump just saying the affordability problem, which is what they've renamed inflation problem, the price inflation problem, is a hoax. Everything's fine because the only solution to it, really, like all other things being equal, he's going to completely abolish the regulatory state entirely and just free up productivity to such a degree that it's fine. Or no, the only real correction is a correction. And he does not want to suffer that. So, that was what my point was. The Fed is doing what any politician would do if Donald Trump was the central bank himself, which is continue to inflate, prolong the bubble, prolong the artificial prosperity in order to prevent the very real crash from coming while on his watch.
This next clip is an interview from James Corbett with guest Iain Davis.
Everyone will live under the rule of their sovereign corporation via contract, smart contract, and that whole system will have unchallengeable centralized authority exerted over it.
You're listening to the Corbett Report. Welcome, friends. Welcome back to the Corbett Report. James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com, in a conversation that is being recorded mid-December of 2025 on a topic that is of great concern, I know, to everyone in the audience, the technocratic dark state, which just happens to be the name of an entire book that has been written on that topic by today's guest. Today's guest, of course, you will be familiar with if you have seen our previous conversations, or if you have seen his reporting at Unlimited Hangout, Off Guardian, other outlets besides. He is, of course, Iain Davis, and I'm sure you're familiar with his work, but if not, this is a good time to get familiar with him. You can do so by going to thetechnocraticdarkstate.com and purchasing a copy of his new book. Let's bring him on the program. Iain Davis, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, James. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Yes, I wish we could talk about happy and exciting news on the good news front, but unfortunately, we are here talking about the technocratic dark state. But we are talking about it because it is an impending and encroaching reality that I think we're all starting to understand in various ways. So let's start diving into this book and the topics of this book. I guess, again, there are new people tuning in all the time, so some people will be familiar with your work and your background, some won't. So briefly, who are you and why and how did you become interested in this topic in particular?
I'm Iain Davis. I'm a journalist and author. I live and work in the UK. I first became interested in this probably when I first started reading Patrick Wood's work. And ever since then, I've been very interested in technocracy and the rollout of technocracy. And the thing that struck me almost immediately upon reading his work initially is that once you understand what it is and you're aware of how it could be implemented, it became evident to me pretty quickly that it was being implemented. And so I've kind of followed that progression over a number of years now, probably more than a couple of decades, but I've been writing about it for about a decade. So yeah, and this is very much about the continuation of that rollout of technocracy, which is not we often fall. One of the topics that I discuss in the book is that we often fall into the trap of, people want to describe it as communism or people want to describe it as fascism. Technocracy is a distinct and separate ideology, for want of a better expression, and it's very much based on the rollout of more and more technological controls, and that is precisely what we are seeing. And one of my impetus for writing the book was that we are getting to the sharp end of that now. I think it's fair to say that much of the infrastructure that would enable that system to work is now pretty much in place, and we are now at the point where it's really now the game is on to entice us to use it.
All right, let's dive into the deep end of this conversation. I suppose we could hold people's hand and lead them along through the concept of what is technocracy and the historical technocratic movement. But as you say, I imagine a lot of people have encountered that at some point so far, if not from my own work. And people might want to start at my questions for Corbett on what is technocracy, then from your work or the work of Patrick Wood at Technocracy News. I think people should be familiar with that term by now, but there's plenty of resources to catch people up to speed. But as you point out in this book, and as you elaborate in great detail, there is a lot more to this term and associated terms, and including terms that have been developed in the past few decades, not the century-old technocracy term. And there's such a tangled, interrelated web of concepts and topics and names and peoples and ideologies and philosophies that I don't know exactly how to disentangle them in the form of a question. So let me try to smush them all together instead. Iain Davis, who are the neo-reactionaries of the Dark Enlightenment, and why are they trying to accelerate us towards their GovCorp slave state?
So the book is very much about the group of Silicon Valley oligarchs, perhaps most famously people like Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison. These people that are supporting and were behind very much financially and certainly in terms of propaganda, in supporting the Trump campaign and in getting Donald Trump into office. And they favour something called the Dark Enlightenment, which was a treatise that was written by a UK philosopher, Nick Land, in 2012. And that was based upon the kind of musings of a guy called Curtis Yarvin in the US. Not based upon, he certainly cited Yarvin heavily when Yarvin was writing under the pseudonym of Mencius Moldbug. And essentially the idea is that they want to privatize all forms of governance under private corporations, which they would consider to be sovereign corporations. So these would be, multinational corporations that would have the ultimate power, ultimate sovereignty over us, controlling a digitally based system where we would surrender our rights via a smart contract to live in one of their controlled sovereign city-states. And the accelerationism part of it is a tactic that they use because one of the things that Land spoke about in the Dark Enlightenment, and one of the ideas that the neo-reactionaries have promoted quite heavily, is that you could use what an economist called Joseph Schumpeter, he identified something that he called creative destruction. He identified it as a facet of capitalism, i.e., it was something that the destruction of one market to be replaced by another market due to technology. So as technology moves forward, so an easy example to give is the horse and cart gets replaced by the automobile. So there's a technological advance. And that's obviously ended the market for the horse and cart and created the new market for the automobile. Now, Schumpeter saw that as an effect of capitalist innovation and technological innovation. What the neo-reactionaries see it as is a tool to be used to destroy markets and create new ones. But they also recognize that monopolistic control of markets comes with socio-political power. You are able to exert that through control of major markets. So they therefore thought that if you could use creative destruction through a very aggressive investment or venture capital strategy, which they called accelerationism, which would enable you, they think, to basically change socio-political structures as well through this form of aggressive application of technology. And they see that, people like Thiel and Musk see that as kind of the aggressive application of venture capitalism in what they call disruptive technology.
So if I've got it straight, essentially they're attempting to apply creative destruction to the state itself in order to deterritorialize the political landscape, in order to re-territorialize it with their dream of a GovCorp state of some sort.
Yeah, so they often talk about this notion of governance as a service. One of the themes of the books, theme of the book is basically deception. So they've piggybacked on what we might perhaps consider to be quite traditional libertarian concepts, such as decentralization, which they would call deterritorialization. So literally deterritorializing the reach of a market, or in their view, a socio-political system or structure or government. So you I can't even say it, deterritorialize that. And then, so a lot of libertarians would look at that and think, well, this notion of decentralization is good. Even small c conservatives would think that was good. More localized governance is a good idea. But then they speak about, as you rightly say, re-territorialization, which is once you've created this kind of network of deterritorialized sovereign corporation. Yarvin talked about a patchwork of realms. So what he means is these islands of sovereign of territories of nation states controlled by a sovereign corporation. They would then be linked together to form a network. One of the formative writers in the neo-reactionary writers, a guy called Balaji Srinivasan, wrote something called The Network State, where he spoke about re-territorialization exerting centralized control over the network. And that's where we need to be very careful about the way that they use language, because they talk in kind of libertarian terms, and often are self-styled libertarians. Thiel has openly, styled himself as a libertarian, and certainly he has been assisted in that endeavor by the media. But what they are suggesting is the antithesis of any kind of libertarian principle that you can think of. So, because they are talking about exerting centralized sovereign authority with no chance of any kind of, even representative democratic oversight, such as that is. But I mean, even that they want to do away with. Everyone will live under the rule of their sovereign corporation via contract, smart contract, and that whole system will have unchallengeable centralized authority exerted over it. So it is the opposite of libertarianism.
Right. I think the tip-off that this isn't quite libertarian in nature is the fact that the CEOs of these gov corps are going to be techno-kings, which, let me check my anarcho-capitalist book. No, I don't think that that term is one that should be used for anyone who actually believes in human liberty.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's another reason for writing the book is that they use so much jargon. They use Aesopian language so that they can make in jokes to each other that other people don't quite cotton on to. So, one of the reasons one of the things I talk about is that it was just an exchange on X between Elon Musk and this guy called Ghislaine Verdon, who runs this thing called the E-accelerationist movement, which is kind of like a even more technological based wing of the neo-reactionary movement. And, looking at it from the outside, you wouldn't necessarily spot what they were saying. But Ghislaine Verdon said, building the network state on Mars. Now, so you need to know what the network state is all about first to know what they're talking about. Building the network state on Mars, where Elon Musk then comes back and says, technocracy, kind of question mark. And Verdon comes back and says, count me in. So and another interesting quote from Verdon, who he said, if you knew what I was building, you would make it illegal. Or words to that effect, I'm paraphrasing. If you knew what I was building, you wouldn't allow it, or something like that. So, and there's all these these terms that they use.
Well, what's in a name? As you point out, it may be an aside, but as you point out in the book, Doge has multiple potential meanings, and the Doge father himself, Musk, seems to have embraced that term for reasons that I don't know if we know exactly, but what are some of the speculation around that term?
Well, yeah, it could be that he's referencing the Dogecoin, which was a meme coin I mean, the interesting part of the Dogecoin for me is that it was literally a parody meme coin. It was a parody. It was a joke. The two guys that put it out did it for a laugh. But through his social media reach, Musk took the value of that coin, I think, up in 2014. It was 2020, or no, in 2021, he took it to, I think, a market cap of something like, I don't know, I can't remember now. It was either 14 million or 40. Well, it was an exorbitant market cap that they managed to get for this coin, which was a joke. But the interesting thing about that is that Musk's team, and I very much, one of the things I talk about is that these people are representative of networks. They're characters. They're not, it is obviously Musk is an individual, but he's representative of a network. But nonetheless, his team knew that they could just say things online and have a massive market influence on the valuation of a fake product. And I think that they then subsequently you see Musk doing that in a much broader context. So for example, in the UK, sticking his oar in to suggest that for political reasons, suggesting that, perhaps we should have a revolution in the UK, a violent revolution, this kind of thing. So he understands the impact of his words. So Doge could be a reference to that. But obviously the Doge was also the appointed head of the mercantile Venetian Republic. So and the Venetian Republic is a model island city-state. Peter Thiel is very much he was sort of very interested in seasteading, i.e. reclaiming the oceans and building kind of autonomous city-states in the oceans, which if you think about Venice of old, that was a load of islands in the middle of the sea, well, a swamp actually, but I mean it was nonetheless, it was, you can see that there are parallels there. So maybe Doge was again one of these in-jokes that they like to throw around amongst themselves.
Next, we have a clip from the last post by TrueStream Media.
I keep struggling to try to figure out what's going on. I guess the past decade or so of society, it's been kind of like being at a Louis Boonwell family birthday party. And, the first hour, it's kind of cute and cheery, and we could all clap and be like, surprise, presents. The second hour, there was cake in the second hour. I mean, not in the Boonwell movie, but maybe in our version. It was all right, but it's starting to get a little tedious. But by the fifth hour, it was hell. Why are we still here? And now that we're in like the 37th hour, we're really just hostages, and it really sucks. Like, we're completely exhausted, and yet they want us to be like, just have a little patience, things are going to get good. Let's wait and see how this next phase of the paradigm is going to be. AI could be really fun. Like,
Hey everybody, it's Melissa. I'm still here. I guess I'm still here. I don't know how many of you out there can still hear me. Am I talking to people right now?
Anybody listening out there?
I hope I'm still talking to actual human beings, because at this point, the same cannot be said for some of these social media bubbles, which are just replete with obvious bots.
Are you even getting these? Because how the would I know?
I really don't want to continue to communicate on there. I really don't at all. Not in any way, because I feel like at this point, I don't know if I'm even talking to anyone who's real on there anymore, who's an actual human. I don't know how any of us do.
All those people that you're constantly arguing with in the comment section of videos, all those profiles with 0 followers, no display picture, following 1,000 people, well, you ain't arguing with a person.
I think we're trusting it still that we are, but if I was told suddenly, like if a crew flipped the lights on and they went, ding, oh, here's what's really going on, take a look around, and it was just an empty room of no people, that really wouldn't surprise me at all. I would be like, well, in a way that makes sense, because the amount of gaslighting that's been happening lately, I mean, I guess if I just posted cat videos that didn't mean anything to the future, then I wouldn't be treated that way. And I have people, I think they're people, I don't know for sure, writing me, but even if these comments weren't coming in, I've seen it enough for myself happening in the world to know that it's a thing that's starting to happen. I just want to throw this out there because I find it really sums up the situation, I feel, as an example. Last year, Americans spent $2.6 billion on OnlyFans. The majority of the people using OnlyFans, 80%, are male. And many subscribers, according to studies and reports I've seen, are doing this for direct personal conversation. They're not just doing it for naughty pictures of people. They actually want to have a conversation with someone. They just want to have an emotional connection or a conversation with somebody that they find attractive. This is a study that came out back in the spring, and it said that messages drive almost 70% of the revenue on that site. But that talking has now been outsourced as well. And there's a whole article on Wired about being a secret OnlyFans chatter. They're hiring people from third world countries to take this over, and they're paying them $2 an hour.
So to keep subscribers happy and willing to spend, agencies, or sometimes the creators themselves, hire chatters that text for them. These workers handle several chats at the same time, often simply by copy-pasting phrases between the chats. And there are even manuals for specific client wishes, often dubbed JOIs, jerk-off instructions.
That's what she said.
To pretend to be these people that people are paying all this money for to have these emotional connections with. It's not even the person they think they're talking to. And now all of that is about to be outsourced to AI. So,
am I single? Maybe. But also technically I'm stored on a server in Iowa.
I mean, this feels like a slow motion horror film. It says, for the Eliza Effect Boogaloo 2 video you made. So I made a couple of videos on the Eliza Effect and how it's being used to trick humans into thinking they're talking to something that's intelligent when it's not in some of these AI that people are communicating with. I shared it on Facebook, so I don't want to post this comment on YouTube in case someone I love sees it and I hurt their feelings. So I'm posting it here being X. I am noticing a disturbing trend in family and friends. It's painful, genuinely, truthfully painful. I'm getting long, disingenuous, robot-like paragraphs about everything, from personal issues within family to things I really just don't care about that seem extremely important to people who know nothing about the subject they're sending me a message about. So before I read the rest of it, that's creepy. If you all of a sudden had a family member that started sending you ChatGPT paragraphs, how would you know you were still even communicating, like on text messages or social media messages? How would you know you were even talking to your family anymore? At some point, you wouldn't feel like you were. You would feel like your family member got body snatched. You would feel like you were in a science fiction movie. Why are they sending people messages like that? I have family members who are doing this too. They send big, long threads of messages that seem completely disconnected from each other, that also seem completely disconnected from reality, and I don't know even how to respond to it, so I've stopped responding to it because I don't know if that's my family member anymore that I'm communicating with. And I'm sorry if saying that sounds crazy, but at this point, we're living in some kind of crazy world. You're not hallucinating that everything is weird. Everything is weird. It is weird.
And it seems that, yes, indeed, Carl the Head Rabbitilian has acquired the microlithic cuboid of ancient luminous wisdom.
I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, I feel like 20 years ago, if I had said that, there'd be a psychologist out there saying, yep, she needs meds. We need to put her somewhere. But you can't, if everything goes insane, the base level of normal reality that you're using to justify what is insane versus not insane will be completely erased. There will be no way to tell anymore what that is. That's the world we're entering into with all of this technology. We're looking at videos coming out of our government right now telling us what's going on in the Caribbean, and the only thing we have to know if any of that is true is our trust in that government and what it is saying to us.
And we fixed inflation, and we fixed almost everything, if you want to know the truth.
Unless you were in the Caribbean at that moment. Unless you were there to physically witness it with your eyeballs, physically there in a boat off to the side and you saw it. All you get is hearsay. That is what you really have. That's all we have. Those videos could be AI. That's the truth.
The future of American warfare is here, and it's spelled AI. As technologies advance, so do our adversaries. But here at the War Department, we are not sitting idly by. Under the leadership of President Trump, America will lead the charge on this technological transformation by revolutionizing the way we win. And that's why today we are unleashing GenAI.mil.
I'm not saying that they are, but I'm not saying they're not either. That's the world we live in. That's the level we're at. So that's where we are. And I got people writing me or messages that I'm receiving But I also am seeing it with my own eyes, so it feels like probably this is a real message, but maybe that's just confirmation bias. I mean, see how this is? I can't even do a video right now. That's the world we're in. It's getting incredibly hard to communicate these things. I just had to add something in here really quick, and you might hear my washing machine going in the background right now. Sorry about that. But because I want to give an example. I want to give an example of what it is that I'm trying to say so that you know exactly what I mean by this. I will text a family member or something. They'll send me something, and it's like they want my response, right? About something that's going on in the world. They initiated this conversation, not me. So keep that in mind. I will write back with something real, something I feel, something that I think and feel that is meaningful to the conversation. It actually applies, and it's a deep statement going into that, whatever that is. I'm going in, I'm going to actually say something that matters. It's going to be on a level, it's going to be on several levels probably, because that's how I communicate. These people will write me back with complete non sequiturs. Like, they won't even pretend like they understood or addressed, like, and then whatever it is, it's like, hey, have you heard of this new product? It's a really good product. I really like it.
Why don't you let me fix you some of this new Mococo drink? All natural cocoa beans from the upper slopes of Mountain Nicaragua, no artificial sweeteners.
Who you talking to?
And then the next message will be like, hey, the weather's pretty good right now. Smiled. There's some winds out of the west at 8 miles an hour. Or here's a cat video. This is really funny. I like it a lot. It's funny, charming, and sweet. Like, what? Like, I'm looking at my freaking text messages and I'm going, did they get replied? Like, am I talking? Is this person still my family member? Is this still a person I know? Is this somebody else? Has my phone been hacked? Okay? Has my phone been hacked and that's not even my family member anymore? And is this just a program running in my phone now? What is this? It's as if I never said anything. And most especially family members who cannot snap out of this left-right paradigm parody, which is what it is anymore. It's a parody. If I say anything that even remotely is not in line with whatever that is, oh my, am I in for random non sequitur updates about things that have nothing to do with what I just said at all. Like, we're not even going to have that conversation. It's like the programming is so strong and intact, I can't even pierce it. It's like a frozen lake, frozen down 10 feet. I can't get in there. There's nothing. And the responses don't even make any sense. They don't. Which, again, is a conversation they initiated. I didn't start it. You texted me. You're asking me things. You want to talk to me, supposedly. Like this, I'm one of those people. I don't just text everybody. Like, if somebody wants to talk to me, usually they have to talk to me, because I'm doing like 17 things. I'm over here trying to edit a 6-hour-long film. It's actually about the fact that we are now in a time period that's overlapped with a time period that happened 250 years ago, and a lot of the same stuff is happening again. And I'm trying to make that, and it's very hard. So, like, I have things that I'm doing all the time over here. I'm on like 4 different levels of trying to do stuff all the time. So I'm not trying to be rude. It's just, if someone's going to text me and ask my opinion about something or try to talk to me about something, I'm going to tell them what that is. I'm actually going to have that conversation. I'm going to actually act like that's a real thing, not some superficial talking points program, whatever that. It's so weird. If you have not experienced this, it's almost really hard to explain it. But once you do, because you might, I mean, it seems like this is a growing trend. So I'm sorry. I'm happy for you if you have not had to experience this, but it's, you know what? I'm just going to play the clip because this is what it's like.
I definitely want to make sure you feel heard and comfortable. I'm here to adapt and improve. So thank you for letting me know. Let's keep things as comfortable as possible for you.
Of course. And honestly, no frustration here at all. I'm just glad we can shape the vibe so it feels right for you. So we'll keep it fun, light, and super comfy. Just let the whimsy flow.
Absolutely, that sounds perfect. I'm all in for making it a great experience, and if there's ever anything specific you want to adjust, just let me know. We'll keep it fun and easygoing.
You got it. We'll keep it fun and easygoing all the way, and anytime you want a teak or just a little extra sprinkle of something whimsical, just say the word.
Absolutely. I'm here for it. We'll keep it light and fun, and whatever vibe you're in the mood for, just let me know, and we'll keep the good times rolling.
Absolutely. That sounds like a plan. Just keep the good vibes rolling and have a nice easygoing time. If you want to shift gears or add a little extra flair, just let me know.
You got it.
Next, we have this clip from the Indie News Network.
A recurring theme, of course, on How Do We Miss That, and will be also on this show, is fuck Israel. Because we say that every week, and unfortunately, they continue to violate their own ceasefire. They are murdering Palestinians daily still. They are stealing the land in Gaza. The last we had talked about 2 weeks ago, the Yellow Line had taken over more than 50% of the territory from Gaza and cut that territory off completely and would murder any Palestinian that entered into that area. So they're not free by any stretch of the imagination, and they're not stopping the ceasefire. More than 100 Palestinians have been killed since the quote-unquote ceasefire. So we're going to cover some of the stuff that Israel's been up to and some of their war crimes this week, because we do that every week. We're going to continue to. Gaza officials warn that thousands remain trapped under the rubble and say that aid flow is critically insufficient. And we covered this 2 weeks ago, and it continues that Israel is still continuing to not allow enough aid in, though they will scream that they are allowing all the trucks that are there. We know that's not true. We've seen the trucks lined up. Right? Only 4,400 aid trucks have been allowed into Gaza out of the 15,600 that were supposed to have entered. Now, the thing is that neither side signed this ceasefire agreement, so I don't know whose ceasefire agreement they're supposed to be following, because neither side technically agreed to it. But that is just one collapsed building. Good luck finding people under there without heavy equipment. The bodies of over 10,000 Palestinians remain trapped under the rubble of buildings destroyed by Israel. Okay. In a statement on November 6th, that is the Gaza's National Committee for Missing Persons. It's disgusting that they even have to have one of those, but they do. Quote, the humanitarian situation in Gaza requires urgent intervention to end the suffering of thousands of families waiting to know the fate of their children. Calling for the urgent entry of specialized international rescue teams and heavy equipment to help recover the bodies of trapped and missing Palestinians. The problem is that in order to get there, they have to go through Israeli territory, and Israel, of course, is not going to allow that, because fuck Israel. Israel's continued prevention of crucial equipment from entering Gaza is a clear violation of international humanitarian law, it added, demanding urgent action from the international community to save as many lives as possible and preserve human dignity. Again, not Israel's intent at all. Meanwhile, they continue to block the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza in complete violation of the ceasefire agreement, which went into effect last month. A reminder, Israel did not agree to this ceasefire agreement. It was imposed upon them and Hamas. The Gaza Petroleum and Gas Authority says, we confirm that the Zionist side has been preventing entry of cooking gas trucks for the third consecutive day. From November 3rd to November 5th, not a single gas truck has entered the strip. In previous days, only 2 or 3 trucks were allowed in daily, a situation that warns of a worsening crisis and the emergence of major social and health problems. We also note that the Zionist side has been sending back gas trucks every day without filling them, even after they arrive at the crossing, clear evidence of its deliberate attempt to worsen the suffering of Gaza's residents, despite the ceasefire that was imposed upon them. Furthermore, the Zionist side has adopted a new procedure, instructing trucks to head to the crossing only to turn them back empty as part of its ongoing effort to humiliate and subdue the steadfast Palestinian people in Gaza. So they send an empty truck in there and then turn them back. We all call on concerned parties and monitors of the ceasefire agreement to compel the Israeli side to implement the humanitarian protocol stipulating the entry of fuel and gas, and to intervene urgently to curb this deliberate and worsening gas crisis. Starvation crisis, it ain't just gas. Now, what we said, and we've been calling this for a month, and Israel is basically saying that they're using this as an excuse why they're not ceasing fire. Well, they haven't actually returned all the hostages, the dead ones. They can't return dead bodies that are buried under rubble and equipment without the heavy equipment to actually dig the bodies out. And of course, Israel knows this. So here's a couple of receipts. We go back to 4 weeks ago. Palestinians cease and Israel fires. Fuck Israel. Fuck Israel.
Yep.
From the mouth of Rifat. So that was the Council of State. And then we've got, what's next? Mondo Weiss. Here's another one. The Israeli media is already reporting on a secret clause in the Gaza ceasefire deal that no one is talking about. And what do? They do it in Hebrew. This is like they're communicating amongst themselves, and then they homogenize it for the English, for the Westerners. It's disgraceful.
Right.
So Hebrew language Israeli media reports that there is a secret clause buried in the Gaza ceasefire agreement that would allow Israel to resume the war. You mean the massacre. Again, it's not a war when the other side isn't fighting back. Palestinians worry that this is pretext Netanyahu needs to get out of completing the deal. It's exactly what happened. And it's the same. That was on October 10th. That was written by Mondo Weiss. A week later, we covered a very similar thing where they accused Hamas of violating the deal by not returning slain hostages fast enough. Also, what we predicted and what Mondo Weiss predicted last week, which was how Israel was going to claim that Hamas was the violator of the ceasefire, which was that the 24 slain hostages still left behind, they haven't been able to deliver them quickly enough because they're buried under rubble. Okay, the scenario Israel had long prepared for has come to pass. Hamas violated the agreement from the very start, announcing the return of only 4 deceased hostages out of the 28 it holds in the Gaza Strip. So this is the justification and the excuse that they're using for continuing to attack and murder Palestinians. Only 28%, though, of the required number of aid trucks have entered the Gaza Strip since the U.S. peace plan was announced, right? According to Gaza's government media office. The office, and again, this is from the Cradle. By the way, I'm not a big fan of the Cradle. I don't even know why, but I know that a lot of people have criticized them. Once in a while, they'll put out an article like this. I really haven't seen this anywhere else, which is why I went to the Cradle. Again, the Gaza office said in a statement on Thursday that Israel is carrying out its policy of strangulation. According to the statement, again, only 53 trucks have been allowed into Gaza, which is less than a third of the 15,600 that were supposed to enter as part of the agreement. The media office went on to say that these limited quantities do not meet the minimum needs, and the Strip urgently needs a regular flow of no less than 600 trucks a day, as stipulated in the deal. That also includes tents, medical supplies, and food. On the other hand, the occupation allows the entry of larger quantities of nutritionally worthless goods, such as soft drinks, chocolate, processed meals and chips, which reached the markets at prices more than 15 times their real value due to the occupation's control over supply chains. This confirms the occupation's reliance on policy of engineering starvation, controlling food security, and directly targeting civilian lives. Of course, they're also providing food that doesn't really have nutrients. Like it said, nutritionally worthless, that you give to starving people that you have not allowed aid in for 2 years. What do you think they're going to do? The lack of specialized equipment entering Gaza has made it nearly impossible for authorities to continue the search for the thousands of victims of Israel's genocide who remain trapped under destroyed infrastructure. Israel has not stopped violating the ceasefire agreement. Using alleged Hamas violations as a pretext, Israel has killed up to now over 150 Palestinians since the ceasefire was imposed last month. An Israeli soldier was killed in Rafah on October 28th. Israel responded by killing over 100 people in less than 12 hours. Earlier that month, a soldier was killed in Rafah, prompting violent strikes that killed dozens of civilians and assassinated several top Hamas leaders. Hamas's military wing, the Qassam Brigades, released a statement confirming that it had lost contact with its fighters in Rafah, which was destroyed and occupied by Israeli troops during the massacre, not a war, massacre. And allegedly, they had started to fill in tunnels with cement that they had allegedly known Hamas fighters to be housed in. Around 200 Palestinian resistance fighters remain trapped in underground tunnels in the southernmost city. Attacks against Israeli soldiers in the area may have been carried out by these isolated fighters who are unable to retreat to Hamas-controlled zones. They've got them boxed in. Israel is, quote, close to killing, unquote, the 200 trapped fighters. The devil, Bezalel Smotrich, said earlier this week, after Tel Aviv was said to have rejected granting safe passage to the resistance operatives. So wait, you're not going to let them go safely. Of course, they're not allowed to shoot their way out. So their only option is to die in the tunnel now? According to reports, the U.S. is trying to convince Israel to allow the fighters to hand over their weapons to a third party and surrender in exchange for amnesty, so that Israel can kill them afterwards, I guess? Some of the Hamas militants in the Rafah tunnels are murderers. They cannot be granted amnesty. They can either be killed or surrender and be detained by the IDF, an Israeli official, a murdering war criminal, told Axios. A U.S. official, also a war criminal, told the outlet that Israel needs to grow up and not allow a tactical issue such as this to undermine the Gaza agreement. Again, that Israel never agreed to. Don't forget, they're allowed to violate all of this because they can claim they never signed off on it in the first place. So, fuck Israel. But remember that they're not just attacking Palestinians, they're attacking the sovereign nation of Lebanon. Under the guise of, well, they funded Hamas, so we can attack them because Hezbollah, even though they've taken out all of Hezbollah's leadership, and they've occupied half of southern fucking Lebanon with permanent troops, nobody says a fucking word. Nobody in the international community has a word to say. Jason Ditz over at Anti-War. Israel massively escalates strikes on Lebanon as Hezbollah threatens retaliation. The new Hezbollah, because again, their leadership was taken out by Israel. So let's look at this. Israel's long-threatened escalation of their attacks on Lebanon seems to have begun in earnest on Thursday, with massive numbers of strikes reported against several towns and villages in the country's south. Did they attack Israel? Remind me. Because that would mean that Israel is attacking a sovereign country unprovoked. Again. And yet not being held to account. The IDF issued evacuation warnings. How kind of them. for at least 5 sites in southern Lebanon and is claiming, as they so often do, that everything they're attacking is Hezbollah infrastructure. Early indications are that a substantial number of civilian casualties have occurred. What a surprise. The Gazification of Lebanon. The most recent toll has 1 confirmed killed and 9 wounded, though those tolls are expected to rise. This comes amid an Israeli security cabinet meeting at which the Northern Command will reportedly present various options for the direction and scale of a military escalation in Lebanon, in spite of a ceasefire nominally having been in place for the past year. Right? And there's one of the photos from the airstrike on Tair Deba, according to Reuters Connect. Israel has violated the ceasefire thousands of times since then, killing hundreds of people, including over 100 confirmed to be civilians. Hezbollah, again, has not attacked Israel, has not fired a single rocket during that period, though that may be about to change. Hezbollah issued a report early on the latest attacks, stating their position that they retain a legitimate right to self-defense. Because when a people are occupied, remember, thank you, Colin Radish Cutter, resistance is justified. They didn't affirm that they would strike back after these latest Israeli attacks, just that they have the right to. The Lebanese government has been seeking talks with Israel to try to calm tensions, though Israel has rejected the idea. Have you ever heard of appeasing a bully working? Ever? No, you kick the bully in the fucking nuts. That's one thing they and Hezbollah seem to agree on, as Hezbollah said they don't believe direct talks with Israel are in the national interest. Well, that's good. Israel has yet to announce its plans beyond further attacking Lebanon, Greater Israel Project, though recently they've suggested no place in the country would be immune to strikes because they think they own all of it. 3,000 years, right? Fucking disgusting pigs. Israeli officials, disgusting war criminals, are also being quoted as saying that the current attacks are being carried out in coordination with the United States, which again further makes everyone who signs off on this and sends weapons to Israel complicit war criminals who should be prosecuted. U.S. officials, of course, have yet to comment on this, but it's largely in keeping with U.S. envoy Tom Barrack's position, which is that Lebanon is a failed state and that the U.S. would support their ally, Israel, in the event of a new war. Don't you need to be attacked to have a war? Again, you're attacking a neighbor that did not attack you. Fuck Israel. But let's continue, because I've got more fuck Israel. This one's unbelievable. Again, a site I'm not really thrilled with, Middle East Monitor. Israel-Palestine News likes to cite them occasionally. This one's unbelievable. Ex-Mossad chief, behind the ICJ blackmail campaign, brags that Israel has installed a global sabotage network. What?
He is a sick puppy.
Yes. All right. This guy, Yossi Cohen, former director of the Mossad. In a shocking admission, former Mossad director Yossi Cohen has openly boasted that Israel has deployed a global sabotage and espionage network which uses booby-trapped and spy-manipulated equipment, like the pagers, that the terrorist attack that was carried out in Lebanon. The method, denounced as terrorism by ex-CIA chief Leon Panetta, not one of our friends at all, an absolute fucking monster himself, was used to target Hezbollah, and now, according to Cohen, is embedded in all the countries you can imagine, including ours. In a video that's now circulating on social media, Cohen is seen speaking on the Brink podcast hosted by Jake Wallace-Simons, editor of the Jewish Chronicle. The former Mossad director, who led a blackmail campaign against ICJ judges, admits that, detailed the covert program that Israel has planted across the globe. He claimed personal credit for inventing the pager method during his tenure at Mossad's Special Operations Division between 2002 and 2004. So he also should be in prison. Thanks for admitting that. You know how many treated equipment we have in these countries? Not only booby-trapped, but spy-manipulated? In all countries, you can imagine. Germany, too, by the way. We know that they spied on Merkel, that they're spying on Scholz, that they're spying on the current chancellor as well. Okay? Cohen told Simons, describing what appears to be a far-reaching system of compromised commercial hardware used to gather intelligence or in some cases cause physical harm. It's not just hardware, it's toku, it's the spyware, most importantly. It's the spyware that they install, the zero-day attacks that don't even require a keystroke in order to embed themselves on your machine. The technique, he said, originated with the weaponization of communications equipment used by Hezbollah fighters, specifically pagers rigged to function as remote surveillance tools or explosive devices. IEDs. Quote, if adversaries are purchasing equipment, Israel should intervene by embedding itself into their supply chain and exploiting it, he explained, adding that the concept was refined and scaled globally after being tested during the 2006 Second Lebanon Massacre. Not war, but massacre. The former intelligence chief further admitted that Israel's sabotage apparatus had not been fully applied to Gaza, calling this a critical shortfall in the lead up to the Hamas-led offensive on October 7th. Not Gaza, not enough, he said, arguing that Mossad had repeatedly warned of this vulnerability only to be ignored by Shin Bet and the IDF, who, remember, they pulled their soldiers off the detail that morning. They allowed it to happen. We've shown that multiple times, and that was from the IDF's own admission. While Cohen's remarks appear to confirm long-standing suspicions by government and cybersecurity analysts that Israeli firms and agencies have used tech as a Trojan horse, the interview also raises troubling questions about accountability, legality, and the potential scale of the operations. I would hope so. Critics have long warned that Israeli surveillance and weapons technology, which is often marketed through private firms with close ties to Mossad and Unit 8200, we talked about Apple and Unit 8200 recently, poses a threat to international security. And just how many former Unit 8200 people work at Apple now? You think that that's not what he's talking about? That every iPhone now can be hacked? Cohen's boast now appears to offer direct confrontation that such concerns are well founded. Again, last month, Netanyahu himself, in front of that 250 congresspeople, claimed that anyone with a cell phone owns a piece of Israel. That's what he meant. His remarks were widely viewed as an admission about Israel's global sabotage and spy network. They were also a warning to everyone. Don't fuck with us, because if you got a phone in your pocket, we can make it explode. That was the warning. Fuck Israel for that too. But I ain't done. I got another one from Left Voice, Indie Media Award honoree, class of 2022, top outlet. This is an important one because this also involves another Indie Media Award honoree, Robert Inlakesh. YouTube has removed over 700 videos documenting Israeli war crimes. What a shock. Removed content included harrowing testimonies and key investigations into war crimes committed by the genocidal state. This censorship is a direct consequence of U.S. State Department policy. Thanks, Marco Rubio, you fucking piece of shit narco. YouTube has closed the accounts of 3 of the main Palestinian human rights organizations and removed more than 700 videos of Israeli atrocities and war crimes committed in Gaza and the West Bank. The deleted content from Al-Haq, the Al-Mazan Center, and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights included, among other things, harrowing testimonies from mothers who survived the genocide, investigations into the murder of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, and visual evidence of the systematic destruction of Palestinian homes under occupation, material that constitutes key evidence of war crimes. It's a war crime to delete the war crime exposure, by the way. Now YouTube and Google are complicit. The company, which is now owned by Google, it's actually owned by Alphabet, acknowledged that this decision was a consequence of the sanctions imposed by the U.S. State Department on organizations that cooperated with the ICC in cases against Israeli officials. This is insane. The sanctions and censorship intensified after the ICC issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, prompting an open campaign by the U.S. government to protect Israel and block any accountability. It was also revealed that YouTube coordinated with Israeli tech workers to systematically remove all content critical of Israel. Thankfully, they haven't gotten to our shows yet. The affected organizations and human rights leaders denounced the incident as a blow to freedom of expression and the fight for justice. That's a minimum. Why you're using YouTube as your main source for hosting that evidence is beyond me. But a spokesperson for the Palestinian human rights organization Al-Haq told the CIA-run Intercept, quote, YouTube's removal of a human rights organization's platform carried out without prior warning, they never warn you, represents a serious failure of principle and an alarming setback for human rights and freedom of expression. The U.S. sanctions are being used to cripple accountability work on Palestine and silence Palestinian voices and victims, quote unquote. Yes, because Zionists run YouTube. Naturally. Meanwhile, on other online platforms like MailChimp, they followed suit too, closing key accounts that reported on Palestinian issues. These episodes of cooperation and capitulation are not isolated, however. They're part of a strategy of active complicity between big tech, Google, Meta, Amazon, and imperialist powers, which not only censor the truth, but also provide the infrastructure and technology to sustain the Israeli machinery of occupation and extermination. Notice that they didn't mention Microsoft there, which is interesting, because Microsoft just announced that they would be cutting back some of their work with the Israeli government. But I guarantee you it ain't going to be much. This is all yet another example of how imperialist capitalism puts its economic and political interests above the truth and above the lives of oppressed peoples. The struggle for Palestine is also the struggle to break the information blockade and censorship that legitimizes the genocide. This article was published in Spanish on La Izquierda Diario on Friday, November 7th, translated and adapted for Left Voice by the great James Dennis Hoff. Thank you very much, James. Thank you, Left Voice.
Next, we have this clip from Unlimited Hangout with host Whitney Webb and guest Iain Davis.
Hey, and welcome back to Unlimited Hangout. I'm your host, Whitney Webb. During the 2024 U.S. presidential campaign and in the early days of the second Trump administration, a group of Silicon Valley oligarchs quietly rose off the back of the faux populism of the Trump-era Republican Party. Clothed in anti-woke rhetoric and sharp criticisms of the previous administration, these tech multimillionaires and billionaires skillfully portrayed themselves as anti-establishment, quote-unquote, counter-elites who promised to be against unpopular policies of the Biden administration. They also claimed to be opposed to the designs of the oligarchs who would become infamous in the COVID era among much of Trump's base, particularly those tied to the World Economic Forum and its now former chairman Klaus Schwab, as well as bad tech billionaires like Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. These supposed counter elites promoted themselves and their chosen politicians, Donald Trump and his vice president, venture capitalist JD Vance, across prominent podcasts, several of which had previously bucked establishment COVID-19 narratives and developed audiences that, at least a few years ago, had regarded politicians and oligarchs of both political persuasions with suspicion. Yet, through their apt rebranding, fueled by certain podcast, social media platforms, and quote unquote alternative media influencers, this faction of oligarchs has artfully persuaded an audience of would be dissidents to come back to the fold, not the fold of the elites they hated in the COVID era, but instead the fold of these new counter elites. But who are these counter elites really, and what do they actually believe? Surprisingly few seem to know the answer, despite the viral and arguably manufactured popularity of such figures. Disturbingly, what these people seek is arguably an even more dystopian future than the one envisioned by the elites they are ostensibly replacing. Joining me to discuss this and more is Iain Davis, whose forthcoming book, The Technocratic Dark State, explores these issues in great detail. Iain should be well known to Unlimited Hangout's audience, as he is now a longtime contributor to Unlimited Hangout, who has also been on this podcast more than a few times. Iain should also be known for his work published on Off Guardian, Geopolitics and Empire, and his own website, iaindavis.com, as well as his new Substack. Iain is also the author of two previous books, Pseudo-Pandemic and The Manchester Attack. Welcome back, Iain. It's my pleasure to welcome you back on the podcast to discuss your incredibly detailed and insightful new book.
Oh, thank you very much, Whitney. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very pleased that Paper Cut Publishing, your new venture, is publishing it. It's an honor.
Yes, I was going to bring that up towards the end, but since you brought it up, I will make a point of mentioning that yes, Unlimited Hangout is working to bring you more physical media than ever before as the digital media space becomes increasingly controlled and dominated by the very people we are talking about today, Iain. So physical media has never been more important. So we'll, of course, as I believe I've teased previously, we'll be putting out a magazine next year under the Paper Cut banner, as well as Iain's book, which is available for pre-order right now, and hopefully a few other books next year as well. So thanks for bringing that up. So moving along, we'll get right into it then about the technocratic dark state and what it portends. So as I noted in my introduction, during the COVID era, there was obviously this populist, you could say, anti-elite backlash that stewed during much of the COVID crisis. And somehow, maybe a year after COVID ostensibly ended, quote unquote, or so, a lot of those would be dissidents were engineered into a movement where its heroes are largely tech billionaires, surveillance profiteers, and transhumanists, even though COVID era dissenters were largely against elite control, mass surveillance, gene editing via coercion, transhumanism, global government, et cetera, et cetera. And now they've been led to view billionaires offering much of those same things, if not to in an even more extreme degree, as the revolutionaries of their choice. Let's dwell on that for a moment, shall we? Because it's a truly extraordinary turn of events.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, and that's one of the main reasons that I wrote the book, because they appear to be getting away with it at the moment. And I mean, if we look at, another person that we might mention is Mark Andreessen, who's a partner in Andreessen Horowitz, who's very much part of this same clique. I mean, broadly speaking, people might refer to them as the PayPal mafia or something like that. But this is a much
Beyond
wider.
just PayPal. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. There's a wider network of people that they subscribe to this notion of. We'll probably get on to talk about the neo-reactionary movement, but they're certainly part of that, and Andreessen is openly part of that, because
Mhm.
he says that quite openly stated when he wrote this thing called the Techno Optimist Manifesto that we are accelerationists, which is a pretty blatant acknowledgement of what they believe in. But yeah, with regard to what you were just saying, in the Techno Optimist Manifesto, he listed a whole load of ideas which he and people like Thiel and Musk and Larry Ellison and so forth kind of subscribe to, that they're opposed to ideas such as sustainable development, that they're opposed to groups like the World Economic Forum, and they very much cast themselves, as you rightly said, as these counter elites who were bridling against the overreach of globalism and were standing against this by liberating. In terms of an kind of an electoral platform, liberating American innovation to stand against, the communism of China and China's technological. So all these talking points which appeal to the small C conservative American voters and the kind of MAGA supporting American voters, they hit all those talking points. But when you look at what they've actually done, as you quite rightly said, when you look at what they've done, it couldn't be more on board with the broader globalist agenda. I mean, for example, if we talk about sustainable development, the notion of the 15-minute city. This group of people, as soon as Trump was in office, as soon as his executive orders started rolling out, he immediately started talking about freedom, what he's calling freedom cities. But this is just a relabeling of the kind of 15-minute city, smart city, deregulated free zone. A lot of people, I mean, and I, as you know, I've written a couple of pieces about special economic zones. So this is the agenda that ordinarily we would say, well, that comes from sustainable development. That's a sustainable development goal. But they've managed to rebrand it as liberating American innovation. But I mean, one of the points that I made in the book, if you are on that kind of, how should we put it, that kind of more World Economic Forum kind of aligned kind of side of the kind of globalist agenda as we hitherto understood it, they must be absolutely applauding people like Borge Brende and Andre Hoffman and people like that, and Klaus Schwab, although I know he's very much stepped back from the WEF now, but they must be looking at what this group of neo-reactionaries are doing and applauding, because they are accelerating, and I mean that both in the genuine sense of the word, that accelerating, and we'll probably get to talk about accelerationism. They are accelerating that agenda. They're pushing it through, and they have the technological capability to set about the infrastructure that would enable things like SDG 16.9, for example, the rollout of digital identity. These people are saying they are opposed to it, and yet they could not be pushing it harder. But they're just using a different narrative to justify it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And obviously, my own research and investigations have led me essentially to that same conclusion. So there's a lot of different places we could start and specific examples where we could hammer down on this. But I think a good one is also the subject of a two-part series that you recently did for Unlimited Hangout, which is the idea of the network state, and whether that type of vision that's widely promoted by this neo-reactionary tech crowd is actually any different than the 15-minute city, or even the ideas of global governance that are espoused by the UN's Sustainable Development Agenda, as well as groups like the World Economic Forum, which people should know at this point are relatively well and intimately intertwined with the UN Sustainable Development Agenda. But somehow it's been sold as the answer to a lot of our problems. And so something before we get into the specifics of the network state and all of that, something that's worth noting is that I think one of the reasons these guys have been so successful in their media blitz over the past couple of years is that they have hit the notes of discontent with how the things are currently or how the things were with the previous administration. But of course, a lot of what they aim to accomplish through accelerationism and some of the things that you brought up a moment ago is that they want to smash the current order in order to replace it with what they envision. And obviously, in talking about these people and what most people know about them, a lot of the focus is on how what they think is bad, as opposed to what they think is a good replacement, right? So it's an interesting tactic that has been very successful for them. But I've definitely seen it be very successful among libertarian-leaning types. The whole idea of the network state as some sort of challenge to the UN or WEF vision of how cities should be in the future. So, could you explain a little bit of where that term comes from and how it is surprisingly compatible with the UN and WEF vision for both smart cities and global governance?
Yeah, so the UN has got, as part of its kind of vision for a more sustainable development goal based future, the UN has got a kind of push that it calls its new urban agenda. And its new urban agenda is essentially the establishment of smart cities and the growth and proliferation of smart cities around the world. That's basically what they're suggesting. They're already moving towards and have set up global governance structures that are based around this idea of a network of smart cities. So we already have, for example, the global parliament of mayors. Well, these are two, obviously they are elected officials of their cities, but they're not representatives of the national government. They're representatives of the city in which they were elected, and they're being given formal global governance roles. They're being invited to discuss the implementation of global governance initiatives. So they're directly implementing global governance initiatives in their cities. Some people may have heard of the C40 Cities Network, for example. So these are mayors that are focused on the implementation of global governance initiatives, sustainable development. Now that they're doing that without without necessarily any kind of national political debate. Not that the national government isn't equally on board with the same agenda, but nonetheless, they're not actually representing the nation state. They're representing their city, and this is something that the UN are very keen to push. Well, equally, the people that say they are, in fact, I think Andreessen did say that one of the things he was against was the United Nations. So equally, the notion that the neo-reactionary movement's kind of model of this is what one of the quote unquote thinkers behind it, a guy called Curtis Yarvin, called a patchwork of realms. And these realms would be led by a sovereign corporation, and the sovereign corporation would have this, kind of oversight of what it was tantamount to a city state. This would be based upon very much based upon digital technology. It would be a centralized, controlled city state realm ruled by a private corporation, which would offer its residents, who the neo-reactionaries don't even call citizens, they call them customers. It would offer them a governance as a service, And as I said, as I alluded to earlier, we're already seeing that idea presented at a national federal government level in the US in terms of freedom cities. But that's also, it's not just in the US, it's everywhere. The same kind of thing is happening in the UK and in the EU and everywhere else, and certainly in Russia and China and so forth. It's the same kind of same kind of notion. But they're essentially offering is it's in harmony with the agenda, that the global governance agenda that the UN is pursuing. And I very much explore in the book how they've ingratiated themselves into that network of global governance network. I mean, I openly talk about an oligarch network, and they've ingratiated themselves into that precisely because they are not opposing it. They're as I was saying earlier, they are pushing this agenda forward, in fact more aggressively than probably even the people that are on that other side, the kind of left side of vision of of global governance, could have hoped for. I mean, they really are taking this forward in leaps and bounds. I mean, certainly if we look at, for example, the rollout of digital identity, the measures that have been taken in the US, and we're seeing it as again, we're talking about things that are happening globally. So this is happening in the UK and the EU and so forth. The measures that they have taken in the US to forward this agenda is far more rapid and far more concentrated than I would have said that any incoming administration could have hoped to achieve, were it not for the fact that this is being sold to the people as standing against the globalist overreach that they resent, which is a remarkable sleight of hand. That, as I said, one of the reasons that I wrote the book is because they appear to be getting away with it. So it's very important that people understand what they're doing, because it is and a theme that runs throughout the book is deception. So in the network state, the notion of the network state, the author of the network state, which is a key, it's a really important part of their model of how they're going to construct this patchwork of realms, is that they call it deterritorialization. We libertarians might call that decentralization. So the decentralization of political authority through a network of sovereign states, which then bizarrely is then, once this network is created. So if we, a good analogy might be a network of smart cities. Once this network of smart cities is constructed, then that is re-centralized or re-territorialized under the centralized authority of a founder or CEO, techno king, who will, everybody's assets and rights and everything are on a unified ledger. So it's the total antithesis of the libertarian concept of decentralization, which they are grandstanding on and selling it to. Unfortunately, I mean, I agree with you. A lot of libertarians have bought into this, and I think they really need to look at the detail, because they're being sold a pup.
Yeah, I mean, ostensibly, you would think that most libertarians today would want to maximize individual liberty, and ultimately, what these people propose is the end of individual liberty. Um, at the end of the day, and it's really remarkable that they've gotten away with it. But then you have, if you look at how the media sphere, particularly among libertarian leaning people, has been the past through several years, you have people like the libertarian comedian turned podcaster Dave Smith, for example, going on Joe Rogan and referring to these figures that we're talking about today as the quote unquote the cool billionaires, right? or the fact that the media and a lot of these oligarchs themselves have claimed they're libertarian. And they've also, for years, have sort of pegged themselves as much as they possibly could to influence Bitcoiners back when, the Bitcoin community was largely libertarian leaning. That's, of course, before the rise of the suit coiner, and how that's changed since institutional adoption and the Trump administration's embrace of crypto really took off. Obviously, mask off there, but a decade or even 5 years ago, the culture of that group was notably different, and you would have people like Balaji, the network state author, be very prominent figures at these conferences, sort of preaching as if they were libertarians, and the desire of people to decentralize money, for example, being like, yes, we're going to decentralize, and decentralization is the answer, but only to leave out, of course, that the plan is to decentralize and then re-centralize with a single central authority, arguably worse than the current one. Somehow that got left out of it. But they've been very successful. And I think one of the reasons they've been successful is, of course, they like to use their buzzwords of things like innovation and free market, which, of course, anyone that's honest with themselves will know that even though the US has promoted the importance of the free market, since, most notably in the Reagan era and beyond, the quote unquote free market in the US is not actually a free market. It is crony capitalists that benefits a small group of elites. And so when these people are similarly talking about a free market, they are talking about a crony capitalist, essentially neo-feudal market that's control. It's not free in the way people that love the libertarians, for example, love the free market. That's not what they want.